Hello, I am Dr. A.J. Kumar, PhD. So, I've mentioned my main project is QAnal, and I've kind of explained what it is, especially on my on the podcasts, which are over on BitChute and Rumble. This one, I will put a link to it down below, and I thought I did a pretty good job of explaining it. So it's kind of two things. It's a lot of things actually. And I wanted to outline sort of my broader, what I'm doing, large scale. Not just this playlist or this playlist or this playlist or this little project. What is my long-term goals with everything I'm doing? So, the basic premise I have is that the university system has failed, and it is not coming back. It is beyond recovery. You cannot recover the university system. However, the university system is currently where most interesting research occurs, especially in mathematics. So what I am trying to do, I'm sort of doing a searching or an exploration of trying to figure out a way that people can do research, mathematics research, trying to model a way for people to learn advanced mathematics and do advanced mathematics research outside of the university system. And I don't have the answer to that. I know the university system is not long for this world. And so what I'm trying to do is build a home for mathematics outside of the university. Let me find... I need to sort these by alphabetically. So, number one is my QAnal thing. So Craig and I have kind of been on the same page in the sense that we realized, here's Craig Cannon right over here. What I kind of realized, this is something Weilberger has said, and this is something I've kind of realized on my own, and something a conclusion Craig has come to on his own. And this is why I think it's a correct conclusion, because the three of us have three very different backgrounds, and we've all come to the same conclusion. Which is, this is something sort of esoteric to mathematics, but there's a very deep idea nested in what seems like sort of superficially a simple principle, which is that if you can't demonstrate your idea computationally, it's horseshit. And so what I realize is that a lot of analysis, Weilberger's been screeching about this for a long time, a lot of mathematical analysis cannot be formulated computationally. And he's been sort of going through and redoing it in such a way that you can do it computationally, but it's hard and it's a lot of work, and I have not been keeping up on that. I need to start binge watch some more Weilberger because I've been falling behind. And so what I've been doing is writing a lot of this in Erlang, because Erlang's just a nice overall language, and there are disadvantages to the language. It doesn't have a real type system, but overall the advantages of Erlang outweigh the disadvantages. And then Craig and I have... I mentioned this in... I can't remember which podcast. I think it was episode 6, and let me try to find it, and I will try to link it. This one, right at the beginning. Oh no. Oh, it's only on Rumble, that's right, because it got stuck in processing hell on BitChute. Maybe I'll try to fix that. But Craig and I became friends last year sometime, and it started with me trolling him on Twitter. And he had posted a video, I think he was talking about like taking his kids to go to the zoo, and he was talking about something that the chimps were doing at the zoo, and I was telling him that was racist to talk about chimps at the zoo, and he thought that was pretty funny. And we ended up just talking a lot over the next few months and realized that we had come to sort of a very similar philosophy about the world through, again, very different backgrounds. And we've started formalizing that a little bit, and we've been calling it Entropism because it kind of starts with thermodynamics. And I've started writing this in Revelations 22. It's incredibly incomplete. I literally have not, I've written almost nothing. But it is there's something missing in sort of our cultural ethos, which is, maybe back up, why have the university, my original premise, the university system has failed, and I am trying to build a home for research level mathematics and give people a way to do research level mathematics outside the university. And generally, our university system, particularly the American university system, has become the way to produce public goods. Now, public goods are goods that have incredibly high economic value, but markets will fail to price. Research is typically the example of this. Now, I would dispute the premise that, at least in the last 50 years, I don't think the universities, I think the market has ended up doing a better job of pricing public goods than the universities have, particularly in the last 50 years. Namely, and I think a good example of this is open source software. The universities have contributed almost nothing to the field of open source software since BSD. So BSD sort of came out of, it's called the Berkeley Software Distribution. It came out of the universities, and since then, the universities have contributed almost nothing. They have they've contributed some very esoteric research, but nothing that changes the life of an everyday person. Eric Weinstein has had this thing that he said, which is, if you took the room I'm in, okay, and I subtract out all the screens, how could I tell that I'm not living in 1970? I couldn't. I mean, there's books that have been published after 1970, but the core technology is all exactly the same now as it was 50 years ago. There's nothing like the washing machine that changes logistics. And there's some stagnation that has occurred. I will link a video where Eric Weinstein has been talking about this. Something went wrong in our university systems, just generally in our economy, about 50 years ago. Let me find this. GDP median. Yeah. If you look up this, so if you look up real GDP and median male income, I think it's adjusted for inflation. They're kind of in lockstep from, I think if you even were to go further back in time, they would be more in lockstep. And then around 1970, somewhere between 1970 and 1975, GDP continues growing and median male income has flatlined or declined. And you wonder why this happened. And it's not just median male income. It seems like this is right around when we went off the gold standard. It's right around when women started entering the workforce. Right around here is when the moon landing happens. Something breaks in the economy, in the U.S. economy, and therefore in the global economy, right around this point. And Eric's hypothesis is something along the lines of what he calls an embedded growth obligation, which is the idea that most of the American institutions were built following World War II, right around here, and they were all structured based on an expectation that they would keep growing forever. So they were all designed as pyramid schemes, basically. So the university system is a good example. He uses the example, or a law firm, a university. So, I would go to graduate school to become a professor, to train graduate students who would all become, to train 20 graduate students who would each become professors to train 20 graduate students. That's a pyramid scheme, and that can't work for very long, even over time. That system was bound to break. And then, and marginalrevolution.com, I think this might be Eric's site. I don't know. My point, and this embedded growth obligation is actually a really important idea, because once you see the pattern of what I call ego collapse, or ego death maybe would be a better thing, you start seeing it in every single institution that has an embedded growth obligation. So for years, I've been a baseball fan, and I'm trying to get out of it because it's just hopeless. But baseball has started to collapse. The sport has no future. It is decreasing. It is less and less of a part of the culture every year. The average age of a baseball fan is something insane like 55. There's almost no way to watch baseball games if you don't have cable. And nobody under the age of 40 has cable anymore. So it's... And you look at the things that baseball cares about. What are the issues that they're worried about? They're worried about pace of play. They're worried about the pitchers using foreign substances on the baseball. It's like that is not the problem. The problem with baseball, and with a lot of entertainment, is that they are all based on so baseball has this embedded growth obligation. That's problem number one. But problem number two is the entertainment model where you monetize entertainment based on advertising. That just is not going to work for very long because of the internet. And the reason is because if you're monetizing entertainment with advertising, then therefore the business model is selling eyeballs to advertisers. Well, what the internet has done is you, maybe with population growth, have slightly more people. You have basically the same number of eyeballs, but way more people trying to... how do you say it? The same number of eyeballs and more sellers trying to sell the eyeballs, and more people competing for the eyeballs. How do you say it? With the internet, you have exponentially more people competing for the same number of eyeballs. And so you have these really old legacy business models that relied on selling eyeballs to advertisers. A good example of one that has really unambiguously failed has been journalism. Now, we've seen how just in the journalism was always, kind of a psyop. There's examples historically of journalists pulling off hoaxes, but it has become horribly obvious and just sickening in the last 5 years, and particularly in the last 2 years. It has gotten so completely out of hand, just the absolute insane fake news that we see. And I think part of that is the internet has caused this old business model. Partially is that it's much easier to call out the fake news, but also it's that their business model of selling eyeballs to advertisers doesn't work anymore. Who still gets a print newspaper anymore? That used to be a big thing. And it would be like MLB, they still put their stuff on TV. And it's like, that would be like if newspapers still had not moved on from selling print newspapers as their business model. It's like, what are you guys even doing? You still can only watch the games if they're on cable. Now, MLB has a whole host of other deep problems, and the game cannot be recovered. Now, my original thread was about the university system, and how do you replace this university system, which has sort of been our system for producing public goods? Craig and I have an idea, which is to replace it with a church. And that, we call that the Church of Entropism. Now, neither of us, we've sort of developed this, I hate calling it philosophy because I think philosophy is gay, but it is sort of just a set of very obvious principles and a very obvious, logically kind of clean train of thought. And it basically boils down to the idea... Okay, let me read what I've written so far in this. So this needs a lot of editing, and this will probably be a very, very long book. And probably, so this started, for me, I don't want to reveal too much about my personal life, but this started for me really around the end of 2018. I had been just a lot of bad things that happened in my personal life before then. I had ended up developing really severe Trump derangement syndrome. And sometime in 2018, I think I had read Milo Yiannopoulos' book called Dangerous, and it just snapped me out of it. Because I was, there's this sort of red pill, blue pill idea, which is actually a genuinely correct idea. And I had sort of voluntarily been blue pilled despite being red pilled about very many things before, if that makes sense. The phrase I would use is every blue pilled person is red pilled about something. And a good example of this is there's something called Gelman amnesia. So the red pill, Michael Mellis has a good way of describing it, which I'm not sure if this is a sort of a very specific definition of it. But his version is the red pill is the idea that what is presented to us as reality by the corporate press, the corporate media, is in fact a carefully constructed narrative designed to keep very unpleasant people in power. He repeats that so often I've memorized the phrase. And the blue pill would be the absence of that knowledge. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now, I think it's a little bit more broad than that. It comes, I think Malice took it from Moldbug, who took it from The Matrix. And it's meant an analogy to The Matrix, where you get the red pill and you realize the world is a simulation. And it's a little bit more broad than that, but I can't remember my original point. My point was that I had seen, I'm not going to get into the details, but I had basically seen, when I was a young kid, really blatant examples of corporate media manipulation. I knew that they were incredibly dishonest and deceitful, because I had seen firsthand examples of corporate media censorship of things. And so I had sort of ended up, due to, this is relevant, I had ended up due to some sort of chaos in my life by seeing this Trump thing. I really didn't like Trump at first. I didn't understand what he was about. And I understand him a lot more now that he's not president anymore, of course. And I really didn't like Trump, and I knew the media was lying about him, and I should mention, I'm not really a political person, and I'm not trying to make a political point here. I'm trying to illustrate through a personal story why this entropism, how I came to these ideas. I had developed really severe Trump derangement syndrome, basically from reading too much of the corporate press. And why was I doing that? And basically, once the Trump derangement syndrome broke, I started to wonder, how did I get to be so brainwashed? That's the point. Once the Trump derangement syndrome broke, I started wondering, how the hell did I get so brainwashed? I'm a very intelligent person. I call myself the smartest mathematician who ever lived. I mean, I'm obviously I'm not. That's an homage to Terry Davis. Started to wonder how I got so brainwashed. And I started thinking about it, and I started thinking about religious psychology. And what I realized is that thinking clearly and cleanly about things, especially if you have incorrect abstractions, is very costly. So this is something we see in functional programming, which is that as soon as you get your data representation right, your code is really obvious. But if your data representation isn't correct, then your code becomes really clunky and hard to read, and really there's too much logic in there's too much secondary complexity in your code. And this generally is sort of an abstract concept that comes into thinking, which is that if your model of thinking is wrong, then thinking clearly is really, and thinking rationally, thinking logically is really expensive. And generally, thinking logically is really expensive. Kahneman and Tversky did some experiments. There's a book called Thinking Fast and Slow, where basically they did a bunch of experiments and came to the conclusion that humans basically have two thinking systems in their brain, the fast system and the slow system. And the fast system is instinctual. It's sort of our evolved lizard brain, and our slow brain is our rational brain, and the slow brain is really expensive. It's really expensive and time-consuming to think about things. And so I came to this conclusion because one of the reasons I had become sort of voluntarily deranged, there were times where I knew that I was believing something that wasn't true, and chose to believe it anyway because the alternative was, I don't know, too scary almost. And what I realized is that the reason that these sort of brainwashing and religions and these cultish derangements happen are because people are inherently uncomfortable with uncertainty. That's something inherent about humans. And entropy is another word for uncertainty. And so this is about how to deal with uncertainty, how to deal with chaos. But there's more to the axis than order versus chaos. The concepts are really deep, and this is anyway. After I sort of woke up, I started wondering, how do you get so brainwashed? Why do people become, crazy religious? Because I thought religion was nuts at the time, and I think I now appreciate it a lot more. And what I realized is because it gives you a fast way to come to correct decisions. And then religions, sort of on a metaphysical, not a metaphysical level, religions on sort of a meta level have selective pressures have sort of pairwise selective pressures. Now what I mean by that is a religion that has been around for a very long time is much more likely to be correct than something new. Just generally, something old that has stood the test of time is more likely to be correct than something new. And so I came to a lot of these conclusions from sort of my brainwashing snapping and wondering about how did I get so brainwashed, doing a ton of research into psychology, reading, really the most influential book was Nassim Taleb's Inserto books. I cannot recommend those enough. And it kind of metastasized, something like that, into this line of thought, which I could not explain to anybody else, but it was obvious to me once I figured it out. And then Craig had independently come to more or less the same line of thought and had developed it in different directions on his own. And so that is really how we bonded, how we ended up becoming friends. That was where I learned about Erlang, because Craig is a very experienced Erlanger. And we've started trying to formalize Entropism. And Craig, I want to mention before we get started, rumble.com. I'll try to put a link to his channel. Craig has these great videos about geopolitics. Now, Craig, if you've seen the Craig Cannon Minds page, you would get the impression that this guy is totally nuts, and that's because I intentionally take him out of context. But if you watch, here, let's just watch him talk. This video is great, The Mutual Capacity for Violence. This is an amazing.
Everybody's just, born negotiation and the root. The 10th of March, 2021. In this video, I'm going to discuss the root of negotiation, and the root of negotiation is the mutual capacity for violence. I will go on to discuss how Violence begets trust. Trust begets trust signals, and so on. And from there, you build society. At least in the human case, you do. It's not quite the same in every other.
This video is excellent. I'll link to it down below. This is a really good. This is what we would consider to be entropism. This is an entropist argument, and we're trying to figure out what entropism is a replacement for, and we can't really say it's a replacement for. So you know what? Let me back up a bit. My original premise was, why am I doing all of this? Why am I doing QAnon? Why am I doing all of this stuff? I want to build a home for the sciences, for mathematics, for research, for public goods outside of the university system. But you have to have a common ethos. You can't let it get hijacked by these communists the way the universities have. And so our plan, which may or may not work, is to start a church based off of our philosophy called entropism, and use the church as a means of producing public goods. So that is our idea. And so I'm going to read what I've written so far, only 10 pages about entropism. It's one of those ideas that's so like, it's like trying to explain linear algebra. It's such a pure and clean or WF algebra, such a sort of pure and clean and sort of crystallized and very, in a sense, small and self-contained ecosystem of ideas that it's very hard to see the scaffolding that led to it. So entropism is so I have these great quotes with Craig. Post-revelation thinking is never the same, and you can't make people have revelations. You can just lead them up to the point they are likely to have one. Entropism is a body of philosophy developed by the founder and Craig Cannon. It is a superior replacement for liberalism and also has elements of a religion. It is a network of ideas and reasoning tools which are self-evidently correct and often counterintuitive but difficult to accept. If you are reading this, it is probably obvious to you why entropism is needed. So Christianity fell largely due to the Marxist psyop against religion, and because what they would do is they would pick on some element of Christianity that wasn't literally true, and there was a problem, which is Americans, I think, had largely developed this cartoonish version of Christianity where you had to believe that the Bible was literally true, and so as soon as you could falsify any literal element of the Bible, then it was easy to undermine people's faith. Whereas in Europe, I don't think Europe definitely has problems with the Marxist psyop against Christianity, but their problems are a lot different than the ones in America. Liberalism has failed for a number of reasons. There's another reason that has occurred to me recently about why liberalism has failed. But I said the most important reason liberalism has failed is that it is based on a false model of psychology. Namely, liberalism assumes that someone will change their opinion on something given a sufficient amount of evidence or a compelling, well-reasoned argument. In practice, the opposite is true. People typically believe in something more when confronted with evidence contradicting their belief. All models are wrong, but some are useful. Liberalism's model of psychology is not only wrong, but is counterproductive towards the ends of liberalism. Now, I've kind of changed my mind on this because I realized Craig has a great quote, which is, think about what did Social Security mean from the perspective of the people implementing it? And what does the false liberal model of psychology mean from the perspective of somebody implementing it? And this has sort of been Michael Malice's premise, which is that liberalism, or democracy in general, is based on having this fake consensus. And typically that consensus has been dictated by the corporate press. So an example of this was, let us look at sort of two great political hoaxes in history. Number one was the Russia hoax against Donald Trump, which I fell for hook, line, and sinker, I will admit. And number two is the Watergate hoax against Richard Nixon. Now, if you actually were to go back and objectively look at the fact pattern about Richard Nixon, it is completely ridiculous, the idea that you would, okay, I shouldn't be saying this. This is sort of a half opinion that I have. The idea that you would remove a president from office because somebody broke into a hotel room, today, given everything that we've seen, especially from our modern presidents and things that past presidents have done, the idea that you would remove somebody from office because somebody on his campaign broke into a hotel room is just like, it just seems like such a petty thing in retrospect. But I think the reason, if that had happened today, it would not have worked. Okay, whether or not, I should have structured my argument differently. What I mean is, whether or not that was something that Nixon should have been removed from office for, if that had happened today, it would not have worked as well, because back in whatever 1974, there were 3 channels on television, and it was much easier for the corporate press to build a narrative that, oh, this Nixon guy has to go. Whereas today, you couldn't, the corporate press psyop against Trump didn't work. I mean, it did, they were able to get him out of office. What was I going to say? Oh, liberalism sort of relies on that false consensus. This perspective on psychology is sort of something, is sort of a, what do you call it, a noble lie. You tell people this so that they believe that whatever is happening is based on, has some rational basis, but there's no, that's not actually how people think. And so I've also said Christianity is opaquely correct, meaning it is largely correct in its conclusions, but does a poor job, by modern standards, of articulating why. Opaquely correct is not good enough anymore. What is needed is something that is transparently correct. This means that it can usually, this is a key element, is that you can't come to every conclusion rationally, because it's too expensive. You can't rationally think through everything. It's too expensive. And then oftentimes you have like halting problem type issues where you can't figure something out. So you do need... Here, let's keep reading. What is needed is something that is transparently correct. To clarify, entropism is not a axiomatic system. I've ranted about axiomatics before. I think that's not a good way to think. Yeah, I said axiomatics is retarded. Entropism makes a consistent choice to accept the world as it is with all of its flaws and imperfections. Philosophy begins with a decision to believe that there either is a world or there isn't. So maybe that's the major fork, is nihilism versus not nihilism. Entropism consistently chooses to believe that there is a world and it should be accepted as it is. There is such a thing as objective reality, and there is only one objective reality. However, under most circumstances, reality is opaque. This is the most powerful idea in entropism, is the rewrite barrier. This is sort of the opposite idea of emergence. Anyway, so entropism, the model is that you have truth is sort of a rewrite barrier on top of reality, and virtue is a rewrite barrier on top of truth. So let's read the 3 fundamental questions. So this is Craig's quote. The 3 fundamental questions in philosophy, I think I took this from Molyneux. What is real, what is true, and what is good? The first thing to understand is that those are 3 different questions. And as an analogy, consider the 3 questions to be analogous to a territory, a map, and a compass. Reality is analogized with a territory. So these are the real-world physical constraints of what you're dealing with. So truth is the map. So this is your model for the territory. It is assumed to be incomplete, and in some cases literally incorrect. Virtue is analogized with the compass. This is your orientation. It tells you what to do, where to go, and where to avoid. The first principle of entropism is as follows. Reality trumps truth trumps virtue. In this model, constraints tend to flow upwards and information tends to flow downwards. And meaning, we're also not being retarded about the rules. Nothing is like, rules are, it's not that rules are made to be broken, it's that, a plan is a platform for change. Or maybe something like that. Reality places constraints on truth, which in turn places constraints on virtue. Put otherwise, if morality conflicts with reality, reality wins. You can see a lot of problems, particularly the problems with the universities, are because they don't have this principle. They don't enforce this principle. They let people's notions of good and evil trump the truth. Right? The just absolutely absurd race Marxist ideology has been allowed to be taught in, it has influenced biology departments. There was a guy who was a graduate student in math at Harvard saying, not even him. There was a fucking Fields medalist, Timothy, I can't remember his name. Tim Gowers. Tim Gowers saying that 2 + 2 = 5 makes sense. Now, I did a podcast, one of these, and I'll try to remember which one. One of these with Craig Cannon that I did, I was explaining to him, you know what it was? Here is Shocking Truth About Set Theory. Yeah, so there's also a part 1 to this. I don't know where that went. The Shocking Truth About Set Theory, I was showing him set theory, which is sort of the basis of modern axiomatic mathematics, and it's all just a bunch of language games and smoke and mirrors. And we were reading out of Munker's topology, and Munker's was very honest about the fact that it's smoke and mirrors and language games. Now, if you are a professional mathematician and you think that mathematics is constructed out of smoke and mirrors and language games, the idea that you could construct a different smoke and mirrors language game in which 2 + 2 = 5 makes perfect sense, that makes sense. Now, the Q-anal view of mathematics it mirrors entropism a lot more, which is, no, 2 + 2 doesn't equal 5, fuck off. That's Q-anal's. That's Q-anal's view. 2 + 2 = 4, fuck off. It doesn't allow for stupid shit like that. Okay? It doesn't allow you to do stupid postmodern shit. Okay? Okay? Conversely, notions of virtue tell us what truth is worth exploring, and truth is our reasoning tool for dealing with reality. So, an example of this, a notion of virtue might be logistical technology, meaning, okay. I'm trying to think of an example. The example I'm thinking of is architecture. It would be good if we could cross the river without getting wet. So we build a bridge. Well, in order to build a bridge, we need to have some knowledge about how to build bridges, and that is truth. We need to know what type of structures work. We need to basically develop a theory of architecture. And that is where virtue informs truth, and then your constraints from reality about things like gravity and materials, those put constraints on the truth. But the idea that, hey, there's a river and we would like to cross the river without drowning or getting wet, that is, that's your compass telling you what part of the map you need to develop. And then the reality, which is what materials do you have on hand, that constrains how you construct your map. Okay? At the most basic level, things that are simple and make sense are better than things that are complicated and or do not make sense. A truth system in which 2 + 2 = 4 is superior to one in which 2 + 2 = 5. WF algebra, see Revelations 14, is superior to Boolean algebra because it is simpler and makes more sense, and that's why. Truth is our reasoning tool for dealing with reality, but it should not be confused with reality itself. This is important. Newton's law of gravity is a different thing from gravity. And then rewrite barriers. We want to talk about, Taleb wrote an entire book on anti-fragility. Go read Taleb. And then porting his fragility, anti-fragility idea. So the opposite of fragile is not robust, it's anti-fragile. So fragile things are things that lose from disorder, and robust things are things that are neutral to disorder, and anti-fragile things are things that gain from disorder, that need a bit of disorder in order to work. And we have this idea of sense, nonsense, and anti-sense. So the opposite of sense is not nonsense, it's anti-sense. Nonsense is neutral, it's something a stroke victim says. One key principle is that, so anti-sense is something where somebody is actively trying to undermine your ability to make sense of the world. And Entropism's ethos is anti-sense is one of the most egregious offenses. Trying to spread anti-sense where you are poisoning people's ability to make sense of the world by particularly spreading infectious ideas like communism, that is a severe offense in entropism, spreading or engaging in anti-sense. And this is why liberalism. This is one reason why liberalism has failed, is it does not have a mechanism for disambiguating good and bad ideas. It assumes that liberalism, in a sense, assumes that that is already present, that there is in the culture that where liberalism is. It assumes that there is a way to disambiguate a good idea from a bad idea. But if that is absent, particularly if you and communism and Marxism, its main goal is to undermine people's ability to disambiguate good and bad ideas. And that's one of the things, that's one of the tactics it uses. And so it's fairly easy to detect sense, nonsense, and anti-sense. Yeah, we just have that intrinsically built into us. Anyway, so I started the video. I wanted to explain what I'm doing. What is my goal? What is everything I am going over? What is everything I am doing? What am I doing? And this is what I'm doing. I want to build a home for research level science, mathematics, chemistry. We also want to, sometime very far down the line, start opening up schools for kids and research institutions. We want to give people the ability to produce public goods according to some sort of patronage program, but you also have to have some ethos to defend against, wokeism or whatever form of communism shows up against these mind viruses, and also to have some foresight about what sort of future attacks on the system might occur. The university system has been completely consumed by the communist agitation, and it is going to kill the university system. States need to start. Don't get your kids out of school. I'll just say that. It used to be you would tell people to stay in school. No, get your kids the hell out of school. Anyway, that's what I'll end with. And along the way, we're going to change some things that are broken. Try to, if you're going to replace a system, you might as well fix some of the flaws that you see in it. Sharp elbows dominating sharp minds. Something needs to be done about that. I don't know how you fix that. Anyway. That was what I wanted to do. Outline what I am doing, why I'm doing this. As I've probably been talking for well over an hour, as briefly as I possibly can. That's what I'm doing. That's why I'm doing it. Is the university system has failed. I'm trying to build, or trying to start building something that can be a replacement for it. And I'm just going to do the best I can, and that all you can do is the best that you can do. That's a good phrase. All you can do is the best you can do. All right, see you.